How are you guys doing? Today is Saturday, June 19th, 2021. Out here in this quarantine, this is the first time that Juneteenth has been a federal holiday in American history. I'm not going to dig deep into that, but with this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual profile for Jacob deGrom. The elite starting pitcher for the New York Mets turns 32 today, and with this profile, I plan on going through his accomplishments and accolades to give people a better understanding of how amazing and how one of a million Jacob deGrom is compared to just like some of the league's best pitchers now. If you're unfamiliar with Jacob deGrom, I think you should know that many people that are aware of who Jacob deGrom is, they associate his name with just baseball greatness. I think that regardless of his situation, he's definitely made the most of it, and he has shown time in and time out that he is that you cannot have an argument about who's the best pitcher in baseball year in and year out without keeping him in. Just the same way you can't have an argument about who's the best hitter every year without talking about Mike Trout and Mookie Betts every year. That's how good Jacob deGrom is. So with that said, I'm just going to give a little bit of background into him. He's from DeLand, Florida. And then he would not get selected out of high school. He would play at Stetson. And once he would eventually make it to the minors, he would get selected in the 9th round with the 207th overall pick in the 2010 Major League Baseball draft, and he signed for the Mets. So of course, a 9th round draft pick, and not that many people were keeping their eye on for the most part. He would come in and take the league by storm. In 2014, in his age 26 season, that was when he would finally break through to the major leagues. And of course, not at the same time, many people not expecting much. In his very first season, he would start 22 games in a 2014 season in which the Mets would finish with a 79-83 record. They won 5 more games than the previous season. Jacob deGrom would finish with a 9-6 record that season with a 2.69 ERA as a rookie. He would go on to win the Rookie of the Year, of course. In the 140 innings that he pitched, he only allowed 117 hits, which is 23 less hits than innings pitched, and he struck out 144 batters, which is 4 more strikeouts than innings pitched. And of course, with that amazing performance, he was named an All-Star, but he was still named Rookie of the Year, which is an amazing an award that not many people were able to win, especially players that were taken as the 9th overall pick out of college after not getting drafted out of high school. So of course, he exceeded a lot of expectations by doing that right then and there. But of course, he continued to get a lot better and grow from that. In his second season in the league in 2015, in his age 27 season, he would start 30 games in a season where the New York Mets would finish with the best record in the National League East. In that year, Jacob deGrom would be named an All-Star in his very second season as a starter. He would finish with a 14-8 record, the very first time he finished with double-digit wins, and even to date, that's the second most wins he's ever put up in a season. He finished with a 2.54 ERA. The second full season that he's pitched, in which he's thrown a sub-3 ERA, he threw for 191 innings pitched. That was 51 more innings pitched than his rookie season. He allowed 149 hits in those 191 innings pitched, which is a difference of about 42 hits. That's 42 less hits than innings pitched. He struck out 205 batters, which is 14 more strikeouts than innings pitched for the entire season, while playing in the National League East alongside the Braves and the Phillies and the Nationals at the same time. He would be named an All-Star, and he would finish 7th in a Cy Young Award voting ceremony that would award the National League Cy Young to Jake Arrieta for the Chicago Cubs. But nonetheless, once the Mets made the season and he led the way as their ace, and this is the year that Matt Harvey won the Comeback Player of the Year, they would end up beating the Dodgers in 5 in the NLDS. They beat the Cubs in the NLCS, and this was the year before the Cubs won the World Series. So they went to the World Series, and they would end up losing in 5 to the Kansas City Royals when Salvador Perez was the best player on that team. But of course, they made it. That was the closest that Jacob deGrom has ever made it to a World Series, and Jacob deGrom was a very big part of the reason why they had gotten there in the first place. While his up until or leading up until the World Series, he had a 1.38 ERA in his 2 NLDS games against the Dodgers, a 2.57 ERA in his 1 game against the Cubs, but he had a 7.20 ERA in the 5 innings he pitched against the Royals in the World Series. They actually got the best of him there. But Jacob deGrom was still a very integral part and one of the big reasons that they got there. Following that season, Jacob deGrom would come back in 2016 for his 3rd season in New York. And in that season, he would start 24 games in a season where the Mets would finish with an 87-75 record. They won 3 less games in the season before. They would make the wild card game as they finished with the 2nd best record in the division. Regardless, Jacob deGrom would finish with a 7-8 record alongside a 3.04 ERA. The first time his ERA topped 3, but it's still a 3.04 is the most pitchers dream of having a sub 4 ERA. He has a 3.04 ERA in the major leagues. He would end up throwing 148 innings pitched as he wasn't as healthy as the other seasons. He would allow 142 hits in those 148 innings, so he would still allow less hits than innings pitched, allowed 6 less hits. As a matter of fact, he struck out 143 batters. This is the first time in his career and the only time in his career to date that he's that he struck out less batters than he's pitched innings. He would not be named an all-star this year, but and the Mets, once they made the playoffs, would end up losing to the San Francisco Giants in the wild card matchup. That is the last time that Jacob deGrom has actually made the playoffs. To think about that, even since he started winning Cy Youngs, he hasn't been in the playoffs ever since, but he has been to that level. He has been to the World Series, but following that, he would come back to New York, and ever since, he has never had a losing record since 2016. In 2017, his 4th year in the league with the Mets, his age 29 season, he would start 31 games in a season where the New York Mets would finish with a 70-92 record. They will go on to lose 17 more games in the previous season, and Jacob deGrom would go on to pitch. He would go on to finish with a 15-10 record, holding a 3.53 ERA, which is actually the highest ERA he's ever held to date. Which still, if considering that's the highest ERA he's held to date, that's incredible. That's virtually Hall of Fame level, virtually unheard of. He would pitch 201 innings this season, the most innings he'd ever pitched, at least to that date. He'd allow 180 hits, which is 21 less hits than innings pitched. He struck out 239 batters in those 201 innings, which is a difference of 38 more strikeouts than innings pitched on the season. He would not be named an all-star, but he would finish 8th in a Cy Young voting race that would see Max Scherzer taking home his Cy Young with the Washington Nationals. And following that season, like I said, the Mets would not make the playoffs, but Jacob deGrom would come back, and he would be, and after that, there would never be a conversation for at least an all-star, conversation in which you would not include Jacob deGrom. So in 2018, in his age 30 season, Jacob deGrom would clinch his 2nd all-star game after starting 32 games in a season in which the New York Mets finished with a 77-85 record. They finished with 7 more wins than the previous season. In the season, he would finish with a 10-9 record alongside a 1.70 ERA, which was the best in baseball by a wide margin, actually. He would finish with, in the 217 innings that he pitched, he allowed 152 hits, which is a difference of about 65, actually. He finished with 269 strikeouts, which is a difference of about 47 or 42 right there. He led the league in ERA plus, and he led the league in fielding independent pitching. He led the league in home runs allowed per 9 innings. He would finish 5th in the MVP voting in a race that would see Christian Yelich take home the award, and he would actually take home his first ever Cy Young award in his career after putting up the lowest ERA that he's ever put up in a full season of pitching, which is incredible, which considering how many people have pitched and how few people could get that low of an ERA, especially in today's MLB. But regardless, he was able to do so, and he was able to be named an All-Star for the second time in the year. He was able to win his very first Cy Young. Following that season, the Mets, of course, did not make the playoffs, but the next year in 2019, they come back a lot stronger. In 2019, the last full season that he played in the MLB, that had 162 games, he would go on to start 32 games in a season where the New York Mets finished with an 86-76 record. They finished with the third best record in the National League East, and they still missed the playoffs, but regardless, this is the season where Pete Alonso broke the National League rookie home run record and won Rookie of the Year. But on the pitching side, Jacob deGrom would finish with an 11-8 record alongside a 2.43 ERA. He would pitch 204 innings. In those 204 innings, he would allow 154 hits, which is a different. He allowed 50 less hits than he pitched innings. Over the entire season, he finished with 255 strikeouts in those 204 innings. He had 51 more strikeouts than innings pitched. He had 101 more strikeouts than hits allowed. He would go on to lead the National League in strikeouts for the first time in his career ever. He would be named an All-Star for the third time in his career. He would finish 10th in an MVP voting race that saw Cody Bellinger take home the MVP. And he would be named the Cy Young for the second consecutive year in the National League, despite playing on a team that did not make the playoffs. And right now, considering he's a player that won back-to-back Cy Youngs, that of course proves that he wasn't that it wasn't just a fluke that he won it the first time. If you win it back to back, that's the real deal. And just even though the Mets didn't make it to the playoffs, of course, Jacob deGrom he would earn the respect of all generations of MLB players following those back-to-back seasons that would see him lead the National League in ERA 1 year, and the National League in strikeouts the very next year. But following his third All-Star season, he would come back for 2020, a season that many people that if you're not aware of was shortened to 60 games instead of 162 games because of the COVID outbreak and the quarantine protocols that sports had to abide by. They still were able to fit a 60-game season, but they were able to expand the playoffs to include more teams and at least an opportunity to get to play in it. In this season, Jacob deGrom would start 12 games in a season where the Mets finished with a 26-34 record in those 60 games. They had the fourth best record in the National League East, and with this. And within the season, Jacob deGrom had a 4-2 record alongside a 2.38 ERA. Mind you, this is the fifth time in his career, the fifth time in his first 7 years in the league in which he's posted an ERA, a sub-3 ERA in the games that he's pitched. And he pitched 68 innings. In those 68 innings, he allowed 47 hits, which is 21 less hits than innings pitched, and he would finish with 104 strikeouts in those 64 innings, which is a difference of 36 strikeouts per innings pitched. He would lead the National League in strikeouts for the second consecutive year. He would lead the league in strikeouts per 9 innings pitched for the very first time in his career. He led the league with 13.8 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, and that was the last season he pitched. If they were able to give out and he would finish third in Cy Young in a season that would see Trevor Bauer win the Cy Young, and of course they couldn't name All-Stars, but if they would have named All-Stars, they of course would have named deGrom for putting together one of the greatest pitching seasons that baseball has ever seen. Comparative to, or if you were to shrink it down and compact it into. If you were able to short and compact it or compare it to a 162-game season. But regardless, following that season, they didn't make the playoffs, and that leads us to this current 2021 season where, of course, that we are at Jacob deGrom's age 33 season. Jacob deGrom, at this moment, has started 11 games up to date. He has a 6-2 record, holding a .54 ERA. He has pitched 67 innings, which is exactly as many innings as he's pitched last season, he had one less inning pitched this season than he pitched last year. He's allowed 26 hits in those 67 games, which is 21 less hits than he allowed last season, with the same amount of innings roughly. He struck out 111 batters, which is seven more strikeouts than he struck out last year, a season where he led the National League in strikeouts. So he's already pitching at a better clip than he is last year, a season where he finished third in Cy Young voting in a year where he more than likely could have won it. And he's pitching at a better clip in which he's pitching with better numbers than he had his seasons in which he won Cy Young. And of course, with a 6-2 record and playing on a very good Mets team. This is a Mets team that's currently sitting on top of the National League East, sitting 4.5 games ahead of the second place Philadelphia Phillies at the moment, currently holding the second best win percentage out of the 3 division leaders at the moment. But of course, they're where they are because of amazing pitching from players such as Marcus Stroman, Taijuan Walker, and especially Jacob deGrom. So I think Jacob deGrom, as of right now, is definitely a pitcher that is worth watching. One of the best players to ever play the game at the height of his game. And with that said, I think that his numbers and his accolades and what he's been able to achieve speaks for itself. He is a 3-time All-Star. He's made the All MLB first team twice in the 2 years that they've had it. He is a 2-time National League Cy Young Award winner. He won the Rookie of the Year, not to mention he's led the National League in ERA once, and he's led the National League in strikeouts twice. And he very well could lead it in ERA and strikeouts this year as well. But with that said, I want to thank everyone once again for listening to this piece. I want to wish Jacob deGrom a happy 33rd birthday. To correct what I said earlier, it's not his 32nd, it's his 33rd. And if you ever get a chance to watch him, he's wearing number 48 for the Mets. And of course, the way pitching works is he pitches every 5 games or so. So that's kind of how that works. But if you ever get a chance to watch him, he's just one of the best pitchers you'll ever watch. With that said, once again, thanks for listening to my piece. I hope all is well. And once all of today's exhibitions are done, I will come back tomorrow with another episode of The Elite. Until then, I want to thank everyone once again for listening to my piece. And peace out. I'll catch you tomorrow.